post black with no sound. Oh, there we go.
Can you hear us now?
We're good. All
Sorry
right,
about that.
guys. Sorry. Hi, I'm Nicole from CG Futures, and I'm here with Alex Alvarez, founder of Gnomon.
Yeah, hello again.
Yay! And so we're here at Gnomon in the library, and it's gorgeous, obviously.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so basically we're here to talk about how we're both involved in CG Futures. I was a speaker in 2016. Really fell in love with Kristen and the event and the Australian people in general. You guys are great. And then Alex has been curating speakers for Kristen and the event since the beginning. How long have you been involved?
I think it's been around 5 years now.
Very
And
cool.
so, it started with the workshop at AG Ideas, and then Kristen and I thought it'd be cool to turn it into a weekend event. And so we turned it into like a 3-day event where we'd invite artists from the industry both in LA and try and include some artists from Australia as well. And over the last couple of years, we've tried to increase the presence of local industry as well as international. And so this year we have some people that I know that I've brought from the United States, but we've also managed to include some people from Melbourne and Sydney, New Zealand, and so it should be really cool.
Awesome. Can you tell us about some of the people that you've brought over this year?
This year we're bringing Chris Costa, who's an artist from ILM who I've known for many, many years. An incredibly talented modeler, and so he's a lead modeler there. Has worked on a ton of movies. I've probably known him and known of his work for at least 15 years, let's say. Really inspiring story as far as how he got into the industry, and he's now worked on all these huge blockbuster movies from Star Wars to Kong to all sorts of things. Really nice guy, and I think it's awesome that he is going to be able to take the time to join us in Melbourne. And then Kakai Kataki, an artist that I met at a event that I did in Romania years ago, and we got to hang out for a bit, and then hung out more at another event that we both spoke at in New Orleans. And Kakai is an incredibly talented concept artist, really, really cool guy. Has been working in the game industry for a long time, and a great presenter, great speaker, and so he'll be joining us as well. And then we have Crystal Seyu. She's a lead character modeler at Blur Studios. She is a Gnomon alum from years ago, and she's talked a few times now at Gnomon, and just is a great speaker, unbelievably talented modeler, and so she'll be joining us to talk about her experience working. She's worked at commercial houses, and then Blur obviously does lots of game cinematics that they're really well known for. And then finally Josh Lynch, who I met pretty recently now. I think I met him about only maybe like 6 months ago. I think I met him at GDC, where we had a sort of Gnomon Art Station party, and got to meet Josh. I was aware of his work. He's really big in the substance community, and he just moved to LA. He's working at Santa Monica Studios, the place that made God of War. Incredibly talented with substance, and so he makes these beautiful procedural materials, and he's an environment artist. He worked on Shadow of War up at Monolith, and so he'll be joining and sharing sort of like a technical artist perspective, where you're both an artist but also dealing with procedural tools. Substance has really taken off over the last few years. So those are the 4 that I'm bringing as far as from the US, and then we also have artists from Plastic Wax and The Mill and Weta, just several other studios from Australia and New Zealand. So it should be an inspiring weekend. A lot of really amazingly talented people.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And for those of you that haven't been before, CG Futures is great because of the artists, obviously, that are coming from overseas and locally, but it's also a great networking opportunity. And so you're able to not just listen to demos and see like how people are doing things, but you're also able to really get that one-on-one time, have them look at your portfolio, and it's really about relationships. So it's kind of so when you're picking people, you're also picking people in terms of like a balance between environment and character. Like what kind of goes into your overall?
I think if you look at all the different speakers and studios that are represented, it's from post-production, meaning commercials, commercial, streaming, film, visual effects. You also have games, which obviously can mean console or PC. And so it's mostly post-production related with a little bit of pre-production, meaning concept art, with Kakai. But ultimately, just trying to have a broad spectrum. So environments, characters, modeling, texturing, lighting, rendering, effects. I mean, between all the studios that are coming and being represented, they'll all be covering a variety of topics just to try and make sure that the industry as a whole is covered.
Okay. Okay, cool. And just kind of shifting gears back to you, and not obviously you're important to CG Futures, but also can you tell us a little bit about Gnomon and Gnomon Workshop?
Sure. Gnomon is a visual effects and game school that is in Hollywood that I started 21 years ago-ish, last month. And we started as a small, sort of training center for artists from studios who wanted to get together on weekends and hang out and share techniques back before even Maya came out. So Maya came out in 98, we opened in 97. But we pretty quickly decided to launch full-time programs, which we launched in 98 in our second year. And so today, after 21 years, we now are a much larger school. So we have our full-time programs. We have a 2-year vocational program, a 4-year degree, lots of extension classes that students can take, lots of events we do on campus that we live stream from our soundstage. And then there's the Gnomon Workshop, which is a different company but related, which does online, has an online streaming library of educational content. So it started as VHS tapes and then became DVDs and now is all streaming. And the Gnomon Workshop's a library of several hundred titles on everything that Gnomon represents, design, modeling, texturing, lighting, rendering, software. And so yeah, the Gnomon Workshop's been around for a while as well. And so most of my time spent on the school these days, though. The school has become a really rewarding thing for me, and I think all of staff and all of the instructors, because by having long programs, 2 to 4 years, you really develop strong relationships with students and watch them go from, the fear that any student has starting a program to getting to graduation and getting a job, which is the whole reason why Gnomon exists in the first place. And watching students progress through that and then getting to graduation and hearing about the jobs that they're getting and meeting parents and grandparents and husbands and wives and just hearing how Gnomon's had an impact on their life is something that has just been a really, I think, powerful thing for me and all of our staff, including all of our instructors. So we're very focused on our full-time programs right now.
Don't you guys have like a really high placement rate too within the industry?
Yeah, placement rate, Gnomon exists to serve the industry, meaning what does the industry need? And that's what we've always focused on from the beginning. So we communicate all the time with studios and artists, and again, all of our instructors are artists, we have a lot of them. So by focusing on that, by developing a curriculum that is industry-centric, the hope is that means that the students are getting an education that the industry needs them to have. And we're very selective of the students that we let in, and so Gnomon's not an easy school to get into. And so when you combine the hard work our admissions department does to make sure that students who come here are ready for Gnomon and really understand what they're getting into and are really excited and passionate about working in the industry, combined with the rigor of the curriculum and the program and the length of it, then we have high placement. So I think it was 100% for our vocational program last year. The BFA is new, so we don't have graduates from that really yet. I think we've had a couple because we had some students transfer in and they got jobs. So our placement's always been over 90%. So
that's great. What about people that can't make it to LA? How can Gnomon kind of help people more the broader global appeal?
So I think that's why I started the Gnomon Workshop, in 2000, and so because that's now 18 years. The Gnomon Workshop was to serve that purpose, so that for people who didn't live in LA or couldn't afford to come to LA or didn't necessarily need an intensive long full-time program, meaning people that are already working in the industry and just need specific techniques to be covered. Back when the Gnomon Workshop started, there wasn't a lot of stuff out there for self-learners. And because Gnomon Workshop started in 2000, the internet, popped up in the mid-90s, but even by 2000, there wasn't nearly as much content as there is today. And so the Gnomon Workshop, the audience has always been global. We've sold, back when it was, videos and DVDs, and now with the library, we have customers literally everywhere, all over the world. So any country you can think of, really. There's somebody trying to get into this industry or working in this industry pretty much everywhere. And so the Gnomon Workshop serves that. And then via the school, it's the events that we do. Fortunately, now that live streaming is possible, we've always done events since we opened, but our soundstage could only fit a couple hundred people, and now we can live stream all of them. So the events we do, now we do them every couple weeks, and those are always free, and they're live streamed, and so that's one thing that we can do to help the community.
That's great. So obviously, if you're trying to get a job in the industry, you need a great portfolio. But how important would you say relationships and networking is with that as well?
Well, networking is hugely important. Like, who you know is very helpful. Personality is critically important as well. And so the networking side, you have to be ready to get a job as far as having a portfolio that shows a range of skills that studios need. And then you need to find out where the opportunities are. So for Gnomon, we have full-time placement, a couple people in placement, Shannon and Den, who are constantly talking to recruiters from studios to allow our students to find out where opportunities are.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there are other places like ArtStation where a lot of studios post jobs that anybody out there can look at and figure out what the opportunities are. But portfolio is critical. You need to prove that you can do the work that the studio needs you to do at the level that they do it at. And so that's where the idea of student versus professional. It's like the moment you get a job, you're a professional technically. But to get that job, your work can't look like student work. You need to show that you can do something, whether it's just modeling or rigging or animation. But once you prove that, getting the job is based on personality. Obviously I've hired a lot of people here over the years at Gnomon, and hiring people for us is A, can you do the job, and B, do we want to hang out with you?
Right.
Are you somebody that people are going to want to spend time with? And so personality is critical, networking is super important. You have studios like, let's say Blizzard or ILM, so many people apply, so knowing people there is always a big help.
Which is also why going to CG Futures is great, because you get to meet people from LA and, of course, make those relationships and connections.
Oh, yeah. Going to any event in person, I think, is critically important. I've been going to events all over the world for years since I got in the industry. Before I started Gnomon, I was going to any event that I could, whether it was local events, anything from SIGGRAPH to Comic-Con, and events that would pop up, sometimes internationally. Luckily, I worked for a software company for a while before Gnomon and got to go to a lot of trade shows where a lot of artists would be. And then since Gnomon, I try to go to as many events as I can, because you meet so many cool people at these things, whether it's professionals or students, meaning aspiring artists that are often very cool people and very talented too. And you can meet people online, but it's really not the same. Like to me, going to an event in person, and being able to walk up to people and talk casually and see what you have in common is so much easier to do in person, I think. It could be because I'm older that I have that perspective, and maybe I was 15 it'd be different, but I really don't think it's true yet. I think that the difference between interacting online and interacting in person is still pretty big. And so I think to go to an event like CG Futures and know that you're going to be there with like-minded people, that everybody that's there is similar to you, that you all share something in common, whether it's a passion for video games or a passion for visual effects or art or animation. And we generally don't come across a lot of those people in our daily lives until you're working in the industry, and then you work with a lot of them. So for people that are looking to see what the industry's like, what the people are like, I think any event in person is a huge opportunity to take advantage of. Yeah.
Perfect. And I'm just going to look at some of the questions that people have been sending us.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay. So can you tell us about any of the worker artists coming out of Australia that you has kind of caught your eye or you've found interesting?
Well, obviously by getting to know Australia over the last few years through AG Ideas and now CG Futures, I wasn't too familiar with it prior, and then I've gotten to meet some artists and some studios, and clearly there's amazing work being done in Melbourne as well as Sydney. I think the highest profile one that I think everybody is aware of is whether it's going back to the Road Warrior and then to Mad Max. It's a couple of years ago now, but most of that work was done in Australia, I think, by Allura and some other studios, which is now, I think, the Mill, and obviously unbelievably cool work. And so I think everybody globally is a big fan of Australia if they aren't aware of it as a result of that film.
Yeah.
But through CG Futures and meeting people from places like Luma and Plastic Wax and Other studios like Zero Latency that does VR stuff. There's a lot of cool stuff going on in Melbourne and in Sydney. Very cool studios doing, film work, commercial work, game work, a lot of stuff going on in the mobile space with games. And so it's been really cool to see. Melbourne's a really cool city, and so is Sydney, with really good quality of life. And I know that Luma, which is an LA studio based in Santa Monica, opened up their Melbourne office a few years ago and had some artists move from LA to Melbourne and really dig it. I've been there several times now, and I just think it's a great place. So there's definitely good work coming out of there. And obviously New Zealand's right next door, and that's Weta.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody's not a fan of Weta. I mean, it's
pretty great.
One of the most inspiring studios on the planet.
Have you gotten a chance to play with Magic Leap or check out Weta's new game at all?
I haven't played with it yet. I've just looked at stuff online.
Yeah, it looks awesome.
Yeah, it looks really cool.
Yeah. So we do have a question. Do you have any plans on starting a school in Melbourne or Australia?
Nothing specific, no. So, I mean, we get asked that question a lot, and we're always happy to research it, but it's been 21 years and there's still just one Gnomon. We did have a location in Brazil for 5 years that was in Sao Paulo, which was a cool experience, and I think that we did it for 5 years, and some things about it worked well and some things didn't. I think we learned from that. So since we did the Brazil experience, I wouldn't say that we wouldn't do something like that again. I don't want to ever say a definite no to something. But as I've been saying, Gnomon is so focused on what the industry needs and making sure that we're doing a proper service to the industry and therefore to the students. Opening Gnomons in other places is trying to figure out how to make that work and still meet Gnomon's mission.
Right.
So I won't say never, but
not right now.
Not tomorrow, no.
And then somebody would like to know the culture of the industry now versus the 90s.
The 90s, culturally it's kind of the same, but the 90s were different just because everything was so damn expensive. A computer was $100,000 and the software was $80,000. So because of that, I'm talking about for high-end software, so like the kind of stuff that was being used by Industrial Light and Magic and other studios in the 90s, was so expensive that it was hard to get access to it, so very few people were doing it. So I'd say a big difference was that the industry felt very small in the 90s, which was very exciting to be part of it, because you felt like you were part of some secret club to have discovered it.
Yeah.
Because if you really think back to the 80s, it was pretty much just ILM and a couple small places like Bob Abel and Associates, like pioneering studios for 3D computer graphics. And then in the 90s, Terminator 2 came out and Jurassic Park came out and Myst came out, and you started to see some CD-ROM games for the PC that had some 3D, and the PlayStation came out that had some 3D. But there wasn't that much. There weren't really that many artists. So in the 90s, I think it was extremely exciting to see the growth that was clearly coming. Going to SIGGRAPH in the 90s was incredibly exciting because the internet wasn't really a thing yet, in let's say 95. So if you wanted to learn about what was going on with hardware or software, you had to go to SIGGRAPH. And you'd go, and studios were spending huge amounts of money on their booths, or software companies and hardware companies, millions of dollars, kind of like what E3 is like now for video games. And just to go to SIGGRAPH and see $1 million Onyx workstation the size of a refrigerator, and see all these software tools that were so expensive but so exciting and what they can do, and the rate of change of software development every year. Like you'd go to SIGGRAPH every year and see the new features from Softimage and from Alias and from whoever, and it was just changing really quickly, and it was really cool. Today, I think it's just as cool. It's just way more people know about it. If you look at something like ArtStation that has, I would assume millions of people visit ArtStation every month.
Because they broke the top 100 last year. So
I think I don't know if they broke 100.
Was it
they're
1,000?
They broke 1,000. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think they're around 500 or 600. That's a lot of people, though. ArtStation is amazing, and the people who run it are super cool people, and they serve the industry as well. We have similar missions. But with something like ArtStation, you go there and you see the amount of portfolios and the amount of artists and how talented they are. Or you just go on YouTube and just see how many people are sharing tutorials on how to do stuff in 3D. Mm-hmm. And not just for high-end tools like, let's say Maya or Houdini, but things like Blender, which is free and getting better and better, and so many people are using it. So the industry now is bigger, more people know about it. general population is more aware, I think, of visual effects than ever because of what Disney has done with the Marvel franchise and the new Star Wars movies. Like, people are very aware that visual effects is a thing. General public doesn't understand how it's done. But I would say, 25 years ago, if you said visual effects, people wouldn't necessarily know what you were talking about in the general population. And then video games, I think that's a huge difference between, let's say, the 90s and today. The video game industry has grown. It's dwarfed the film industry now.
Yeah.
It's like for years, people were wondering if and when that would happen. And a couple of years ago, the video game industry's annual gross revenue globally passed all filmed entertainment, meaning TV, film, movies. And it doesn't stop growing, which is amazing. So that's a big difference. In the 90s, most people I knew weren't interested in games. They were interested in visual effects because that was like what was considered high-end. Photoreal graphics were just in film. But today, obviously, I've been playing Red Dead Redemption a ton lately. Like, the quality of the graphics in games now is insanely cool. So artists are more than happy to work in games now. It's a good thing to work in games. You can do beautiful artwork. So yeah, I think I'm just as excited now about the industry as I was then, and I think it's awesome to have so many more people to talk about it with and to share it with. Yeah, so it's only changed in a good way. So
with your own personal background, you started out at that time mainly focusing on characters, but now a lot of your art is more epic environments.
Right.
What inspired that shift in your art?
If I look back to like what I was drawing as like a kid, I was always drawing like characters or creatures in an environment, But I think when I got into 3D, I was just much more interested in characters and creatures, and it was just a single model to have to make, so it seemed more approachable. And also, like in the 90s and then early 2000s, software was better. It was easier to do a single character or a creature than to try and build a massive detailed environment by yourself. And then ZBrush came out, and I got very focused on ZBrush and for character creature work. And then a few years ago, I discovered that rendering engines had gotten so much more powerful, and GPU rendering had gotten really powerful, and that doing environments that had a lot of detail in them became accessible for a single person. Tools like SpeedTree came out and World Machine, and after doing character stuff for a long time, it just seemed like something to try. And I was able to get decent results pretty quickly once I started getting into V-Ray, and now I use Redshift. And you can just, as a single person now, create pretty crazy looking environments, and it's really fun. So now I'm into environments. It could change.
And are you using photogrammetry regularly in your environments, or?
Yeah, photogrammetry I discovered like a few years ago. It's been around since, I think The Matrix might have been the first movie to use it.
I didn't know that. That's really cool.
Yeah, so I think, Paul Debevec did all this research in like the late 90s. And then The Matrix used it. All the bullet time stuff, the backgrounds are made with photogrammetry, but there was no software to do photogrammetry back then. And then a company called RealViz created photogrammetry software, but it still was super time consuming. Like, you could align the photos, but you still had to model by hand. And in the last few years, fairly recent, software came about that you just gave it the photos and it gave you geometry. That was incredibly detailed. And then with ZBrush, you can clean it up and it projects the textures. So once I saw the quality of assets you could build with photogrammetry, I got really into that because it all of a sudden meant I could go outside and grab rocks and trees and surfaces and scan them and use them in the computer. So, and a lot of people are doing that now. I did a talk about it, maybe like 3 years ago, when people were doing it, but less. But today when I go online or look on social media, photogrammetry is definitely a big thing now. Yeah. I think most studios are using it.
Well, you can even do it from your iPhone. It's like so easy now. And then, who are you personally, another question from the interwebs, who are you personally interested in watching talk/give demos at next year's event?
Habib Zargarpur is coming, which is pretty awesome. So I think back in the 90s when I was working for Alias Wavefront, he was at ILM and would sometimes give talks at SIGGRAPH. And I remember Phantom Menace, before we all knew what it was going to become as far as a movie. I'm fine with it, but he was at ILM for that. And I remember a talk he did, I think it might have been at a SIGGRAPH Alias Wavefront meeting about the pod race sequence, that he worked a lot on that and showed all these really cool things that he did in Maya. So I've been a fan of him since probably 2000. I think I've met him once, maybe, I don't know, that long ago. And he left a few years ago. He left ILM and went into the game industry, and has just done a lot of cool things ever since. So I'm really excited to see what Habib has to say. He's an iconic figure in the industry as far as I'm concerned.
For sure. And Habib is actually coming this year by Unity, and he's technically considered like the father of previs, right? Because he's the one that used video game engines with previs to use in films for concept art.
Yeah. And so, and when he left ILM, if I remember correctly, part of him going into games was to bring sort of the eye from film. Like what did the film industry do to make visuals look more, CG visuals look more photoreal and believable, whether it's from color grading to all sorts of tricks that came from that. And I think he was a pretty pivotal person in helping the video game industry's transition towards those kind of things. And a lot of the tools we see today in things like Unity are coming from, I think, him being an early pioneer in that endeavor to create a more photoreal look based on how we, or let's say a filmic look to video games.
Yeah.
So yeah, it'll be cool to see him.
I'm very excited to hear his talk. And then, all right, and then have you, I guess this will be maybe one of our last questions because we're good on time. Have you got anything to say to people who live outside of Melbourne about why they should consider coming to CG Futures?
I mean, I think it's, like I was saying earlier, meeting people is a good thing. You can build relationships from an event that lasts a long time and build friendships from that. Again, like Kai Kataki, who's coming to Melbourne, I met because we were both speakers at an event in Romania. And because of that and meeting in person and hanging out a little bit, we became friends and then met up at another event, because we lived in different cities. So whether it was Romania or New Orleans, and since he still doesn't live in LA, so I haven't seen him in person since New Orleans, even though we've communicated online. So these events are an opportunity to catch up with people, to see people and meet people and build new friendships. And I think that so meeting people, networking, you never know if you meet somebody at an event and are just cool and nice and hanging out. You could be talking to somebody who's an artist at a studio that you want to work at. You could be talking to somebody who's an aspiring artist in school, about to graduate, but a year from now could be working at a studio you want to work at. You just never know. It's like the more people you meet and just being nice to people as much as you can and being genuine is what people generally want. And I don't think you can understate the power of that, because if you go online and try and figure out how do I meet people in social media, you don't meet people, you comment on people's posts. But if somebody that I don't know comments on one of my posts, obviously I appreciate that they made a comment, but I wouldn't say that I've met them,
Yeah.
And so, okay, now let's say they send me a direct message and I respond to it and we go back and forth for 5 minutes. Is that the same as hanging out outside of like a conference center with somebody, or an event like CG Futures, hanging out, at the Abbotsford Convent, and you're having a drink and talking for 30 minutes in a group of people and laughing? It's like you just can't compare the two things. So if somebody's wondering if they should go to events, you should go to as many events as you can. CG Futures is a great opportunity, and there's events around the world that I've been to as well. They're just scattered. I'm very fortunate to be able to go to some of these now as a speaker. But like I said, even before I was a speaker and when I was a student, I was trying to go, and I really think I got a lot out of it. So if somebody's debating whether they should go, the talks will always be inspiring, but it's really the people you're sitting next to, the people that you're hanging out with before and after. If you can, manage to make a connection with people, you'll get just as much value out of that.
I agree.
Yeah.
And not to be cheesy, but when I went a couple of years ago, all the speakers, we really bonded. Like some of my closest friends are actually I met at CG Futures. Like we traveled together. It's been a lot of really good times. And also from the flip side of that, some of the participants, like Monica Batchelor, she's now in LA and loving life, and we end up bumping into her quite a bit. So it really does, like it's very intimate, and it's a good thing. But anyways, we hope to see you there.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
Thanks